Bava Batra daf kaf aleph amud aleph. Right? So the truth is, this week's shiur, we're in the second parak now. This particular Gemara, if it fell out the week of Purim, it would be perfect because it has.
Well, why?
Well, because it has to do with the Parshat Zachor.
Because we can stretch.
There's a story here about the difference about how to read Parshat Zachor in the Gemara. The introduction to it is actually a question on education. Like if I had to ask you, you have two teachers for students in a class, and one of them is able to teach a lot of material quickly, but he's not necessarily so precise or accurate in the material. And the other teacher is very good at being precise and teaching the ideas well and thoroughly, but he doesn't move as quickly. Which type of teacher is preferable?
Both?
I guess so, yeah. In a way. Which is preferable for kids?
Is the fast guy wrong, or is he just not going out of detail?
Okay, good. So we'll see that it could be that he doesn't correct the children who make mistakes. In other words, a child might say something, he might say an error, and he's not makpid to make sure that they're correct.
That's the problem. You come from the product world. You want to get something out and then refine it later. But you can't let the perfection get in the way of getting something out. So you want to.
Meaning what? You have a child who's taught something incorrect?
So teach them...
Or infers something incorrect, yeah.
Right, we want to teach them the material as quickly as possible, but then where things are wrong, over time correct it, instead of just, let's stay on this one line and get it perfectly before we move to the next one. We're not going to get through everything. The perfection can't get in the way, but...
Okay, good. So you think that if a child makes a mistake, later in life he'll correct it, or someone will correct. He'll learn that.
It depends on the gravity of the mistake, also.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. So that's the question that the Gemara is going to start with, and then we're going to take that and springboard into this agadata about the story of Parshat Zachor, and we'll look at various mifarshim, and at the end we'll try to offer a potential solution to a question that Tosfot raises of a stira between two Gemaras. Okay. Gemara Bava Batra daf kaf aleph amud aleph. Amar Rava. Hai mikroya noke de garis, vika achrina de garis tfemine, lo mesalkinan le, dilma, atilat diit rashule. Rav Dimi min harde amar, kol sheken de garis tfe, kinat sofrim tarbe chokhma. So Rava presents the first case. He says, let's say I have a teacher who is a good teacher, but I have another teacher who's a better teacher. But the first teacher has already been hired, right? Now there's a new teacher that moves in, has become available, and he's superior to the first teacher. So should I remove the first teacher because now there's a better option? So Rava says, Lo misalkinan le, we shouldn't remove him. Because if the second teacher knows, the first teacher got kicked out, so he'll become too full of himself, and it won't necessarily teach at his maximum caliber. Rav Dimi argues.
You're not used to him.
That's true as well. Rav Dimi from the Hardia says the opposite. He says, Kol Shekin the Garcia says, no, if the second teacher, if he knows that you got rid of the first teacher and hired him, he'll be extra careful to teach well, to prove himself, right? Kinat Sofrim Tarbe Chochma, right? Because jealousy amongst, Talmidei Chachamim, it increases wisdom, right? This is a famous idea. And so Rav Dimi applies that here into this situation. Second case, Amar Rava, and this is what I mentioned a couple minutes ago. Hani Trei Mikre, Makrei Dardike. Dardike is children or students. So you have two teachers, Chad Garis velo Daig, v'Chad Daig velo Garis. Right, so Kiyas versus Biyun, essentially. So which one is do you hire? Motvina Nahu de Garis velo Daig. Okay, so Rava says you should hire the one who is more Bikiyud and less Biyun. Right? Why? Shabeshta mimela nafka. Shabeshta means a mistake or an error. Will eventually be taken care of, which is exactly what you said, Joe. In other words, you agree with Rava that later in life the child's mistakes will be corrected. It's better to give him kind of a breadth of knowledge when he's young, and then the mistake won't matter so much, or that it'll get corrected later in life. Rav Dimi min harde amar motvinan dedaig velo garis. Again, Rav Dimi disagrees, and he says, no, you do the opposite. You want to have someone who's precise. Shabeshta kevan de al, because when it comes to children, if they're taught a mistake when they're a child, it stays with them for the rest of their life.
I
didn't understand.
Girsa the Yankasa.
Girsa the Yankasa. You don't forget them, right? So that's what Rav Dimi is arguing here. That once you learn something when you're young, that kind of sticks with you forever. And he brings a story to prove his point. Tichtiv כי 6 חודשים ישב שם יואב וכל ישראל עד הכריע כל זכר באדום. The story where Yoav, right, who was the general of David HaMelech, so he was in a particular place for 6 months until all the males of Edom were exterminated. In other words, Yoav was in charge of the army, they killed all the males of Edom. Okay? And then the Gemara now inserts a conversation. Ki ata l'kamei de David, so he goes to David HaMelech, right? And so, Amar le, my time avadachi. So David HaMelech says, why did you kill all the males of Edom? So Amar le, dichtiv timcha et zechar Amalek. Right? Because Edom is Esav. So it says you should destroy all the males of Amalek. So I killed all the males of Edom. So Amalek, what did David say to him? It's not Timchet Zechar Amalek, it's Timchet Zechar Amalek. It means to remove the memory of Amalek, which means to kill everybody, not just the men. So Amalek, Ana Zechar Kiyun. But Yoav says, but I was taught Zechar, not Zechar. So Azal Shaili L'Rabbe. So Yoav went and he asked his teacher. So he said to his teacher, how do you read that pasuk? So Amar le zecher. So the teacher said zecher, meaning what? According to this, that Yoav thought it was zechar, his teacher had taught zecher. Okay, so this is an example of an error that Yoav made when he was a student that stuck with him for a long time, even though his teacher hadn't taught him incorrectly.
But that's not a small marginal error. This is a big deal. This is pass or fail error. You don't graduate error.
Well, I assume the teacher didn't know that one day his student would grow up and be responsible for killing either all the men or the men and the women of an entire nation. But yes.
Nowadays we build this into everyone in school and we don't even hold that practically we can do it nowadays. Although more so then it was a practical current thing, they would have taught it more seriously.
Could be. Yeah. So look at what, yeah. So Yoav, the story continues, Shekal saf sira l'miktale. So Yoav draws his sword to kill his teacher. Amar le amai. So the teacher says, why? So Amar le dichtiv arur oseh melechet Hashem Yirmiyah. There's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu that says anyone who does the melechet Hashem incorrectly or deceitfully should be cursed. In other words, you didn't correct me when I was a student and I thought it was Zechar, even though you knew it was Zechar, you didn't correct me. And now look what I did because of that mistake. It's your fault. That's what Yoav is claiming.
It's not like he's done something so bad or irreversible. He's halfway there.
Hey!
No, I'm saying like, he's making out like it's like he really messed things up. Like he killed the wrong nation or something.
He missed out on the opportunity. He stopped then and there. He can't go back now.
Well, we'll
Just
see.
Kidding. All of you are going to die.
We'll see, actually, the Ben Yehuda talks about this a bit. He's equating Edom and Amalek, which isn't necessarily the right thing to do either. In other words, Amalek was a grandson of Esav, but it's not that you have that same klal of Timchet Zecher Amalek on the whole nation of Edom necessarily.
That's true. But didn't Amalek escape to Edom and then it's...
Okay, you almost said what I thought you were going to say, which is a good question, but you didn't quite say it. In other words...
Well, but you're fine. Amalek, after Shaul...
Good.
Yeah, Agag escaped, or just whatever offspring escaped to Edom, and now the question is it Edom more Esav, and it's that, or is it the...
Good, so I'm glad you mentioned that. When did that happen?
That happened in Sefer Shmuel.
Right, and when is this story happening?
This is it's 2 generations after.
It's less than that. Shaul was commanded to wipe out Amalek.
It's 1 generation after, sorry.
Yeah, and then David HaMelech became king. It's within
generation.
A generation. Within a generation. You're telling me, and this is what the Mefarshim are going to ask. You're telling me Shaul HaMelech was commanded to destroy all of Amalek, the men and the women, and the reason he lost his kingship was because he didn't kill the cattle and he didn't kill the king.
One guy.
Even though, he didn't kill one guy and he spared the cattle, and he lost the malchut because of that. And now Yoav doesn't know the difference between Zecher and Zechar. Right? That's what the Mefarshim are going to ask.
Well,
like it should be something that everybody knows. This kind of going back to what Shimon said, but like even stronger because it just occurred a generation ago.
And also, where did all these people come from? If it's been less than a generation, he let one king live. Who are all these men he's killing?
That's already a different question, right? Well, no, Edom is not the same as Amalek. We said that before.
Okay, but there's no question of them being mixed up yet because it was just.
It just happened, right?
He goes around killing all these men.
There's a question that David HaMelech in Siklag he encounters the nation of Amalek. That happens like very soon after Amalek was destroyed by Shaul. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense either.
Don't we assume there's some type of like magic or something that we have to kill the cattle for that as well? And
good. So one of the Mefarshim says that, and I had never heard that idea until I read it this week. There is a medrash that says that why did Hashem command to kill all the cattle with Amalek? Like what did the animals do?
Because they could do kishuv.
So they could do kishuv to make themselves be animals, right? So it was like a one-time thing that you need to make sure to kill Amalek, and the animals are not really animals. I never heard that before. As like an explanation for why the animals had to go as well. Okay, let's finish the Gemara here. Amar le shavke lehu gavra deleikum be'arun. So his teacher says to him, okay, if a person who is negligent in his teaching of Torah should be cursed, so let me be cursed. You don't have to be the one to implement the penalty, right? Amar le ktiv arum oneach arbo midam. And Yoav says the continuation of that pasuk is, and cursed is someone who withholds his sword from blood. So he says it's my responsibility also to kill you, so I don't get cursed.
What's the problem?
It's in Yirmiyahu.
You should spill that blood.
Yeah, we should check what the context of that is. I'm not sure what exactly he's talking about. Ika da'amre katle, vika da'amre lo katle. So there's some who say that Yoav actually did kill his teacher. There's some that say who didn't kill his teacher. Okay, and that's the end of the Gemara. Okay? You want to check? I think it's Yirmiyahu Mem Chet, perhaps. Arur oseh melechet Hashem Yirmiyahu.
What was it? You when?
I think Mem Chet. Yeah.
That was the whole parak.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the pasuk is. Pretty. You should,
Right. I think we'd have to understand the context of this nevuah.
I'm not normally so pro violence. So could be talking about Amalek there, maybe. But then it wouldn't give me an excuse to kill a teacher.
I think it's talking about. It says here in the beginning of this parak, it's leMoav, Moav instead of Edom. But the idea is that you have to go chase after them and
but he's using
cut them down
to kill a teacher.
Correct.
He might be saying that the concept is like if someone deserves punishment, you should not shy away from it.
Right. He's obviously doing he's extrapolating from it.
It's the end of the Yirmiyahu, which is also all poetic and much harder than the earlier part.
Which, by the way, Tosfot here in the Gemara in Gittin, there's a story in Gittin. Bezrat Hashem, we'll get to it one day because it's a great story about Ashmedai, the king of the demons, with Shlomo Melech. It's like a story I learned as kids. Where Shlomo Melech, he gets there's the king of the demons who kicks him out and takes his place and pretends to be the king. It's a great story. Anyway,
Loki comes from.
What?
You follow Marvel?
Marvel.
No, that comes from Norse mythology. That's not.
Where do you think that comes from?
Separate parts of the world isolated from each other. I don't think there's.
In any event, so as part of that story, at one point Ashmedai quotes a pasuk from Mishlei in that story, because whatever Shlomo sends Benayahu to try to get Ashmedai drunk with wine, and then he quotes pasuk Mishlei. He says I shouldn't drink wine. So Tosfot in that Gemara, so he says V'afal pi shezeh pasuk lo nichtav adayin hayu yodin. Says, how could Ashmedai have quoted a pasuk from Mishlei if Mishlei wasn't written yet?
Wasn't it compiled by Shlomo and not?
Shlomo wrote most parts of it, and it was compiled by, I think, the house of Chizkiah. One of the prakim in Mishlei is written by Chizkiah's court. So I think it's understood that they're the ones who compiled it. But in any event, how could Ashmedai have quoted Mishlei? It wasn't written yet. So Tosfot he says, Adayin hayu yodim. He knew the pasuk, even though it hadn't yet been delivered. Why are we bringing this? What? It's in Torah Shebchtav, right? Well, in Tanakh, yeah. So why am I bringing this? Because Tosfot then says, "Kmo arur oseh melechet Hashem Yirmiyahu, gabe Yoav," In other words, Yoav, he's having this argument with his teacher in the days of David HaMelech, right? Or even before, when he was a kid. And he's quoting a pasuk in Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu lives at the end of the Churban.
Yeah.
So, Tosfos said that's part of the midrash is that they knew it. He doesn't seem too bothered by that. Okay, so first of all, I just kind of assumed here when Yoav asks his teacher, "How do you read this word?" So his teacher said "zecher," the correct way, meaning Yoav understood it incorrectly, and the teacher didn't correct him, right? But the Gemara is written without punctuation, right? It's just letters.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of just Zayin Chaf Reish over and over again in this story. There's another way to read the flow of the story, namely that Yoav asked his teacher, like, how do you read this? And the teacher said, that's how we understood it. Zechar. In other words, that the teacher
he learned it wrong as a kid.
He learned it wrong as a kid because the teacher was wrong, right?
Yeah.
That's another way to understand it.
Right.
Is
So,
there no, I don't know, there's nothing on the Gemara, there's no Mepharshim on the Gemara that clarify which Zechar and which is Zachar.
all right, good. So that's the Rishonim try to do exactly that. Okay, so Rashba says B'Sagol. He says it's Zecher, the way we understood it. In other words, the teacher knew it, but Yoav, for whatever reason, as a child, misunderstood, and the teacher didn't correct him. That's the Rashba's claim. Kach Pershu, that's how they explained it. Shamelamed lo pasha b'kriyato ela be'eshgachato. The teacher wasn't mistaken in his reading, but rather in his, ensuring that the students were learning it correctly. Shelo ishgiach alav kshu to'eh u'machlif kriyato. That when Yoav repeated it and said Zechar, he wasn't makpid enough to correct him. Okay. Tosfot elaborates and specifically dismisses what I just suggested of Zechar. Tosfot says, Perish Rabbeinu Chanan, Adrabe Krai Zecher Kedin. No, it's correctly, not male, but memory. V'hainu Remiyah. So then what is the Arur of Semelechet Hashem Remiyah? The one, cursed is the one who does the work of Hashem deceptively, because that makes more sense to say, the Lo Ashgach L'Meida Heichi Havakari Talmidei. Right? He wasn't being careful enough to see how a student was reading it.
Ramia almost sounds like he's intentionally misleading them. That doesn't really, if I'm teaching you something wrong, I'm misleading you actively. I don't know that Tosfot's explanation that really checks out.
So Tosfot, I hear what you're saying. Tosfot argues exactly the opposite, right? He says here, "Aval ein nireh lefaresh shegam rabot ta'av v'limdo zechar de'im ken lav Ramiyahu." No, if his teacher said zechar and taught him zechar, that's not Ramiyah. He was just wrong, as opposed to leading to something being twisted or corrupted.
Or he knew it correctly, but still read it incorrectly.
Why would he do that?
Therefore, it's cheating essentially. It's like Ramiyah is.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. I guess Tosfot's assuming the teacher had good intentions.
Right.
Yeah, but
yeah,
fair enough. Okay. I want us now to look at the Marsha and the Ben Yoyada, who discussed the question that I kind of forced into Joe's mouth around, didn't Shaul wipe out Amalek a generation ago? Okay, so let's see. Marsha says, "Yesh ledakdek im Yoav yitau rabo kol Yisrael shayu imo b'may ta'u." So we can ask, if Yoav, his rabbi made a mistake when he taught him as a kid. Okay, Mela, his teacher taught him Zechar or Zecher and then didn't correct him when he said Zechar.
The other way around. Doesn't make a difference to this end.
Doesn't make it right. No, Yoav was mistaken, and he thought it meant just the men, but it wasn't just him. It was the entire army, right? All the Jews that were with him in the army, were they also taught incorrectly as children? That they didn't know what the correct halacha was?
They followed orders.
Okay, good. That's what the Ben Yoyada is going to say.
Yeah.
They said, well, your general says something, you do. They did it. Yeah, but yeah, we're going to get to that. Very good. But first, the Maharsha is raising the question, like, right? Ve'od chilo yada echad miYisrael ma'aseh Shaul shelo ish'ir rak mitav atzon v'ne'enash. Right? Did no one know that Shaul had killed everyone, not just the men, and he was still punished because he left the cattle alive? וגם דוד אחרי זאת, שהיה לו ממשלה באדום, והושיב בהם נציבים, כאמור, שם. Okay, ולמה לא החרימם כמו שנצטווה שאול מאיש ועד אישה? There's also a story where David HaMelech, before this incident with Yoav, he goes to war with Edom and he enslaves them. He doesn't kill them all. So nobody raised the question, why are we doing this now? Right?
It's not Edom. It's not
Amalek.
It's Edom.
Right. So, but then why is Yoav quoting Amalek, right? That's the question. מישור ועד צא וכו'. ונראה לפי עניינו, שלא נסתוו בהקים להם מלך בעולם הזה, אלא על החטאת של עמלק, כדאמרינו בפרק כהן גדול, אבל על של אומות אדום לא נסתוו. Right? So he says, so first of all, it seems clear that the the command to wipe out everybody was on Amalek specifically, but not Edom, right? So we need to differentiate in those cases. Shnemar v'lo yasarid b'vet Esav. So he says in the Yemot HaMashiach, we have a Nevuah in Ovadia that says there won't be anyone who survives from the house of Edom. But that's not, in their time, that's like some prophecy for the future. The mitzvah of Mechyat Amalek is Amalek specifically, and not Edom, okay?
Also, doesn't David have an obligation to Edom to be Makil Tov? Because then they protect him when he escaped Shaul.
Edom?
Yeah, he escaped to Edom, I think. To hide out from Shaul.
I know he escaped to Gat, like Achish Melech Gat. And maybe Moav took his parents in? I'm not sure about Edom, maybe.
I thought there was some connection there. They helped him at some point early on. So.
I don't know. I didn't know Edom helped him. We should check the stories, yeah. I mean, I think Moav took his parents, and he had refuge with Achish Melech Gat, but I'm not sure. Okay, v'im ken zot hamilchama she'aya lo be'Edom lo haya ela milchemet reshut. So he says that you have to infer from here that the war that he went to against Edom was a milchemet reshut, right? It wasn't a milchemet mitzvah. Ulchach lo chashu kol Yisrael la'arog gam nekevot. אבל דוד שאל ליואב שהיה שר הצבא מאיזה טעם הקפידו להרוג רק הזכרים. In other words, the people, so it wasn't weird. I think we kind of said this before. It wasn't strange to them that they killed only the men. In other words, for them, it's like you kill whoever we need to kill as part of this war. It's not the fulfillment of the mitzvah of Amalek. It's not Zecher versus Zachar. It's just this is a war and we kill whoever we need to kill. So it didn't bother them. They were killed. But David wanted to know why Yoav acted the way he acted. It wasn't that there was some, right?
Why he made that choice?
Like why specifically the men? V'heshiv timcheh et zachar Amalek. K'tiv milchemet mitzvah b'Amalek yikpid kor al hazacharim. Kal v'chomer lasot ken b'milchemet reshut. So then Yoav said, well, I know with Amalek it says zachar. In other words, we're trying to understand why did he even infer from Amalek to Edom. So Marsha says, because he says if by Amalek it says zachar and that's a milchemet mitzvah, so if I'm going to war against Edom, Kal v'chomer, I have to kill at least the men. That's his connection. Okay? V'heshiv David, anan zecher krinan, ve'en chilu, gam b'Amalek, bein zachar ve'en nekeva. And David says, no, it's zecher, it's not zachar, but the difference is in milchemet mitzvah with Amalek, you have to kill everyone, but in milchemet reshut, you don't. You don't have that Kal v'chomer. Okay? So they're arguing about like the nuances of how to understand the limud, according to the Marsha.
I don't understand how that works. Like
No,
with Amalek, you have obligation to wipe out even their memory. It's not applicable to whether or not they attacked you or you attacked them. Why is...
According to David. And I'm so.
Yeah, like let's...
But for Yoav, he thought it was Zachar Amalek. Only the men.
Right, you have said that, but why David's like focus of what does that have to like?
Because you have to wipe out their memory, it's only a Mechemet, it's only them. Because it's about destroying their memory. Versus if you understood it as the males, you could say that's just when you go to war.
I don't understand. Like
He's saying the war against Edom was a Milchemet Reshut.
Okay.
That Yoav did against Edom.
Right.
There was no mitzvah. There's no mitzvah to conquer. It's not one of the seven nations.
It was to expand the.
To expand their right. So, what do you do when you have a Milchemet Reshut against Edom? So Yoav wanted to say, since I'm fighting Amalek, I have to kill all the men, which was a Milchemet Mitzvah. So for sure I have to kill all the men in Milchemet Reshut. That was Yoav's Kal v'chomer. But David says that's faulty because by Amalek you don't have to kill all the men because it's a Milchemet Mitzvah and Kal v'chomer Reshut. You have to wipe out the memory of Amalek, but it's specific to Amalek. Right.
Okay, fine.
Specific to Amalek. There's no Kal v'chomer here. That's how the Maharsha tries to explain why Yoav is learning from Amalek to Edom. Ben Yoedah says something different. Okay. Right? Why didn't the rest of the people know? Ein Sham, and he says, "V'nir lebesiyat d'shmayek Yisrael asher imo chashud d'ma'amar hamelech v'asanedrin haya kach le'ezeh siba al pi nevuah shel navi she'eta horat sha'ah be'oto zman ve'hem lo sha'alu tam min Yoav sar tzava ki muchzaku etzlam d'lo avid chadashot shelo b'shut." In other words, following orders. Very simple. They didn't think too much about it. Beram al Yoav atzmo ra'iti she'ir hagon chida. תעקעתי תיגשל ליואב וכי לא ראה מעשה שאול המלך עליו שם לא השאיר רק הצאן ונענש ותראה תסבר יואב שבמעמקים שהיו בזמן שאול המלך היו מחשפים, this is what we said before, כמו שאמרו אבותינו ז"ל ועשו בכישוף שידמו אנשים ונשים בהמות שיחשבום שהם צאן, ולא יהרגו, משום הכי יקפדו עליו מן השמיים, אך עיקר המצווה אין על הזכרים. So he says, maybe Yoav thought, even by Amalek, even though Shaul wiped out everybody, maybe it was because the kishuf, which made the animals into people, so Shaul thought the way to kill all the men was to kill everybody, because once they're doing magic, I don't know who's a man and who's not. But the mitzvah is still only on the men. That was Yoav's understanding. In other words, how could Yoav think it was Timchet Zechar Amalek when not even a generation earlier Shaul killed all of Amalek? The answer is
still could fit together.
Because he could still work if you take this midrash and say that it's because he didn't know, he thought it was because of the kishuf, it was like, okay, you have to kill everyone just in case, but broadly the mitzvah is still Zechar. Okay? All right. And then the Ben Yehuda concludes, V'achar mechila mikvot torato. She says, but what the Chidah says doesn't quite make sense to me. Lo yat tzarich la'aytayim adekshifim. You don't need this solution of the magicians, the sorcery. De'en atchala l'kushya azu. Tehatam sholo melech nitztava mipi Shmuel hanavi. בדבר השם שאמר לו, והמתה מאיש עד אישה, מעולל ועד יונק, מישור ועד צם, מגמל ועד חמור. That the pasuk of the command to from Shmuel to Shaul.
From Shmuel to
right.
Shaul.
It's like very, very explicit. You kill every person, the man and the woman and the children and the donkeys.
The commandment is just...
is Zechar. Or at least that's what Yoav could have been thought.
Yeah.
Right? ולכן הענש, שהשאיר הצאן. So he says, I understand why Shaul was punished, because he left the cattle, and Shmuel said to Shaul, kill the cattle, explicitly. But broadly, aval et Amalek bistam, כדי שילך ויקה על פי המפורש בכתוב. אך יואב הושלח להכות את עמלק בסתם. So Yoav thought, okay, no, I'm just going to war, without an explicit command of who. כפי המפורש בכתוב, לכן כתב את שקרא זכר עמלק, ולא יקרא לזכר.
There's no one addressing yet that Yoav is confusing Amalek with
Edom.
Edom.
So the Marasha addressed it,
But,
with his thing with the Milchemet Reshut, the Milchemet Mitzvah.
yeah, but
The Ben Yehuda doesn't quite address it in the same way.
still doesn't... Okay, fine.
Yeah, I mean, the Marasha tries, but it's the chuk. Yeah, I hear you. Okay, good. I want to conclude. There's a Gemara in Psachim which seems to teach, going back to the original point around, do children forget mistakes or do they not forget mistakes, right? Which was kind of how we started this whole thing. So there's a Gemara in Psachim which seems to contradict. So look what it says. Chamishat Dvarim and Kuf Yud Ben Amud Bet. Tziva Rabbi Akiva at Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Shaya Chavush Beveit Asurin. Right? We know Rabbi Akiva was thrown into prison at one point. So he taught Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai 5 things. Amar lo, Rabbi Lamdeni Torah. So he said, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said to Rabbi Akiva, teach me Torah. Amar Einei Melamedecha. I'm not going to. Why not? Because I'll put you in danger if I do. Amar lo, Imen atam melamdeni, ani omer leYochai Abba u'masercha lamalchut. My understanding is that this is like said tongue in cheek. In other words, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, if you don't teach me Torah, I'm going to get you thrown in jail. In other words, like, Amar lo b'ni, yoter mima she'egel rotzeh linak, para rotzeh le'anik. You heard this phrase? Right? More than the calf wants to suckle, the mother wants to nurse. She's saying, I want to teach you, but the situation doesn't allow for it. Amar lo, umi b'sakana, halo egel b'sakana. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, I'm the one in danger, you're already in jail. So if I'm coming and asking you for Torah, let it be on my head if something happens. So Rabbi Akiva agrees. Amar lo, im bikashta lechanek, hitale bilan gadol. Okay, we're not going to go into what this means, but he gives him some kind of like parables. So he says, if you want to already, strangle yourself, so make sure that you do it on a tall gate, like a tall tree. Not for now. And if you're going to teach your child, make sure to teach him from a book that is muga. It's like a haga, like the Rama, that it's like it's corrected, that it's it's good, it's correct.
Audited. Sort of.
Yeah, edited. Yeah, thank you. I didn't know the word. So the Gemara asks, Maihi, what's Rabbi Akiva talking about? So Amar Rava, Rava says, Vitema Rav Mishasha b'chadata. It means a new book or a new topic. Why? Shabeshta kevan de'al al. Because once an error is learned, it's learned and it's not forgotten. So since it's talking about teaching a child, right? So it says, make sure that the book is correct. Because if the book's not correct and the child reads you teach the child from the book and there's a mistake, that mistake, right? If it's a new topic, he's learning for the first time, it's going to stay with him, like the story with Yoav and Zechar, okay? So the only problem with this is who's the one who says this? Shabesh takevan de al in this Gemara in Psachim? Who's the what?
Rabbi Akiva said that.
No. The idea that Shabeshta Kevan de Al is the explanation for Rabbi Akiva. No, the Gemara has a conversation between Rabbi Akiva and Shimon Chaim. And in the end, it says Mayi. The Gemara is interjecting right later and saying, what does it? What did Rabbi Akiva mean when he says it means an edited book or corrected book? Amar Rava v'itema Rav Misharshia bechadita Shabeshta Kevan Da'al. You know, Rava is interpreting Rabbi Akiva to say he must have been referring to a new book that you're teaching to a child, and the reason behind why he said that is that once a mistake is learned, it's learned. What's the problem with Rava saying this? That if we look back in our Gemara in Bava Batra, Rava says, Shabeshta mimela nafka. Remember, Joe was like Rava, that, okay, the mistake will correct itself later in life. It was Rav Dimi who said, Shabeshta kevan de al. Once the mistake is taught, it's taught. So Rava seems to be Kasha Rava. Whereas in our Gemara in Bava Batra, he says, a child, if he learns a mistake as a child, he'll grow out of it. And here in Psachim, he seems to be saying, no, once he learns it, it sticks. So what did Rava think? Okay.
Did he change his mind?
So good. So that's where I want to go at the end here. But Ben Yoyada, first of all, he raises the question. Kashem ma she'elazu. Does he raise this question? I thought Tosfot does. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Let's look at Tosfot. Sorry. Tosfot. Tema de Rava gufa itle beloy achbor shabeshta mimela nafka. This is the question we just asked. Notice Tosfot notes that Rava contradicts himself. V'yesh lomar. So Rava draws the following distinction. דהיינו כשלומד כמה דגריס ולא דייק שיכול להבין מעצמו כשיגדל, אבל כאן די בספר שאינו מוגה סומך על ספרו ואינו יוצא מידי טעותיו. Now, so it says there's a difference between the cases, that when Rava says a mistake will be forgotten, it's in the context of a teacher orally saying something. There's Yoav sitting in the classroom saying Zechar and the teacher not correcting him, so Rava says he'll correct himself later in life. Rav Dimi says no, he won't, because look at what happened with the story with Yoav, right? But here we're talking about a book. So that's what it says. Even Rava would admit that if he's reading it from a book,
it's authoritative, essentially.
So then the child won't forget, and it'll stick the error. So Tosfot tries to distinguish between if he learns it orally from a teacher and from a book, which is why Rava has different opinions. I'd want to suggest perhaps like another solution. One is, you could say, first of all, the Gemara here says Amar Rava vi tema Rav Misharshia. So first you could just say, follow the Girsa that says it was Rav Misharshia who said here, and then Rava's not contradicting himself. But maybe a better, another way I'd like to suggest is, right, with this we'll finish. So what happens here? Rava says, I have a teacher, one is Bikiyud, one is Biyun, which one should I do? I should do the one that's Bikiyud because the child will correct his mistake. Rav Dimi says, no, the child won't correct his mistake. And I'll give you a proof. And he goes on this whole story about Yoav and his teacher. That's the end of the sugya. So who's right? In other words, who's correct in that debate? It's usually in the Gemara when you have two opinions, and then one of the opinions comes second and also brings a proof, and there's no response. So you assume that the halacha always follows that opinion, right? In the halachic context. And in this context, Rava doesn't come with, oh yeah, but what about such and such case, which shows that a child does forget. He doesn't answer, or at least the Gemara is silent. So perhaps I could use that to support what you said earlier, which is maybe Rava was choser bo. In other words, once he heard the story of Rav Dimi from Yoav and Zecher, since the Gemara doesn't record any retort, that must mean that he was modeh to Rav Dimi and agreed, you know what, actually you're right, that Shabeshta kevan de al, because we saw with Yoav what happened with Zechar and Zecher. So then, if so, then in Psachim, where Rava says, Shabeshta kevan de al to explain Rabbi Akiva, so it could be after he heard, or after he had the discussion with Rav Dimi and came around to Rav Dimi's argument based on the proof from Yoav and his teacher. Right.
Hello.